Hi, Dad. Do you feel like you've got support from other men when you need it? There's an old joke about men that they won't even stop to get directions, let alone look at a map. And that can happen to us just about in anything in life, it seems, especially when we're dealing with our daughters. Our daughters, after all, are young women, and just as older women are many times confusing to us, younger women, or our daughters specifically, are very confusing to us, and we don't quite know what's going on or understand what's happening with them. And there's a special way, of course, that men deal with other men. So when we get confused, we could talk to our daughter, not a bad idea. Talk to her mother and say, oh, by the way, here's what's going on. Might get some insight about how women would view a particular situation. But there's a particular way that men talking to men and the way that men give advice to each other without stepping on each other's territory. If you're a man, you know what I'm talking about. So what happens with this is we need to have somebody to talk to before a crisis starts, or when we're in the barrel, as I used to call it, and have somebody that we can go to and say, oh, by the way, Bill, here's what happened to me and my daughter. What do you think? And many times it's just that, what do you think? Okay, so it's hard enough to ask in the first place, but if we don't have somebody to ask, then we try to find someone and they don't know our situation. So what I did, what many men do, is they'll have breakfast. If you go to any coffee shop in America that serves breakfast at about 6:30, you'll see a lot of men in there. That's a great place to gather, and I've been in groups that have been business groups of guys that I worked with. I've also been in groups from church where it's mixed groups in terms of age. I've been involved in groups specifically where I've only been on the phone with people who I hadn't met, but I had a whole phone conversation with them. But I would talk to them and just say, hey, what's happened? Just wanted to chat. Now, just wanted to chat means we're going to find a relationship together and talk about guy things. Football games and work and what's going on with you, and oh, this is what happened with my wife, this is what happened with my kids. Sometimes it's a big deal, sometimes it's not. But having that ability to talk to someone in a way that communicates, in a way they understand because they understand you. So guys, it's just too hard to go alone in many situations, especially when in situations involving your daughter and getting understanding. There's also an old tale that talks about in the early days of rock and roll that the Beatles, who were a big phenomena early in rock and roll, would talk about or try to understand how Elvis, who was a bigger, as if not maybe bigger than the Beatles phenomena in his day, when the Beatles said, we have no idea how Elvis made it without his mates. Because the Beatles obviously was a band, and they had mates that traveled with them and just confronted the stuff that happens on the road and the politics involved and all the kind of things that would be slammed in their face, that Elvis had nobody to talk to, even though he'd have an entourage around him. I don't know if that's true or not, but what I do know is that when I have a problem, and it's kind of a problem that needs to get vented in a way that only guys can do, I'm really glad that I've got a few mates that I have breakfast with on a regular basis, and when I come in sometime and they look at my face and they go, Ken, what's wrong? And I go, well, here's what happened. And I know that they understand what I'm communicating with them because I've communicated situations with them before, and they care for me and my stuff. Don't go alone, guys. Find somebody to have some coffee and eggs with, and they'll be there when you need them. Thanks for stopping by.